"Get off the bus!" the woman screamed. "Children, leave the bus now!" The kids fell over each other, pushing, scrambling to the front. One child was sleeping and woke to the sound of terror. As he squinted out of the rain-soaked window, his face was illuminated by the headlights of a train barreling down the track. This boy will die. They will all die. Kind of. Let's find out what happened next in this story in today's episode of the Infographics Show, Catholic Church's Scariest Ghost Stories. The Children on the Tracks. It's the late 1930s on a dark road in San Antonio, Texas. A school bus coming back from a field trip, packed with sleeping school children, is driving just south of San Antonio, close to Mission San Juan. Up ahead is the intersection of Villa Main and Shane and the crossing of the railroad tracks. The driver of the bus, a Catholic nun, looks worried. The engine starts to sputter as the bus stalls, and the bus comes to a halt, directly on the railroad tracks. The nun turns the ignition. Nothing. She tries again. Nothing. Looking to her side, her heart skips a beat. A train hurtles down the track. The horn blares. The lights blind her. There's no time. "Wake up!" she screams. "Children, get off the bus!" But it's too late. The kids are either falling on top of each other or still half asleep when the train smashes into the side of the bus, cutting it in half, instantly killing everyone in the back. The nun is thrown through the bus window, the glass shredding her face, but amazingly she survives. She wakes up in the hospital, her face bandaged, her legs strapped. It takes a second to realize where she is, what's happened, and then she starts to wail. She tries to get out of bed until a nurse comes and sedates her with strong tranquilizers. Back at home, the nun spends every waking hour damning the God she served her entire life. How could he let this happen? Her faith is now shattered. She makes a decision. An hour or so later, her car is parked at the exact spot where the accident happened. Tears stream down her cheeks as she turns off the ignition. She doesn't deserve to live. She failed those children. Train headlights approach. The sound of the horn bursts through the quiet night sky. She closes her eyes, and it's then, at that exact moment, she hears children's voices. Her car rolls forward by itself, inching forward just enough when the train screams past. In a state of disbelief, she walks to the back, where she sees small handprints in the dust on the trunk. Somewhere in the darkness, she hears those voices again. She can feel the children's presence. Texans and tourists to this day say if you visit the tracks on Shane Road, you can sometimes hear the voices of those children. People come from far and wide. Legend has it that over the decades, cars have stalled on those tracks and been pushed to safety. Of course, there are skeptics and people who claim to have debunked the bus crash story, but there are plenty of believers out there. Some people have gone as far as to drive their car to the crossing and put it in neutral, having already put a layer of baby powder on the trunk, hoping to see little handprints if their car mysteriously moves. We guess we'll call this one a feel-good ghost story, the only one in this video today. The Ghost of Borley Rectory. Built in 1862 close to the site of a former 14th century monastery, Borley Rectory was called the most haunted house in England. The first owner of Borley Rectory, the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, had 14 children, who all claimed they were often kept awake at night by footsteps creeping around the house. Bull died and the children took over the rectory, still believing their house was haunted. In 1900, 4 of the girls, now women, all said they saw the same apparition, a nun walking around the rectory grounds. In 1927, the haunted rectory was taken over by Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife, and yet again unearthly apparitions presented themselves. Servant bells rang for no reason. Lights flashed on and off. Smith's wife claimed she found a skull in a cupboard. That's when the psychical investigator and ghost hunter Harry Price began looking for paranormal activity. He soon reported stones flying through the air. Messages would appear on the frame of a mirror. Vases would crash to the floor for no apparent reason. Then came the next owner, Reverend Lionel Algernon Foister. Over a decade, he and his family said bottles flew through the air, writing appeared on the walls, and his adopted daughter Adelaide found herself locked in a room that didn't even have a key. The Reverend's wife, Mary Ann, claimed a poltergeist attacked her in bed. One night, it threw her across the floor. The family attempted to exorcise the spirits on 2 occasions. One attempt ended with the Reverend being hit by a flying stone. Price visited the house in 1937 to find out. He brought with him 48 official observers, mostly students from a nearby college. They too said they experienced strange phenomena. Price later invited mediums to conduct seances, during which a young nun, a spirit named Marie Lear, was identified. She said that she'd traveled from France and been murdered in the old grounds of the rectory, her body dumped down a disused well. The writings that appeared on the mirrors and the walls were apparently her pleading for help. The second ghost unearthed by the seances claimed that he was named Sunexamur, and he issued a grave warning. On March 27, 1938, he said, "At precisely 9 p.m., the rectory will be set on fire, and after that fire, the bones of a murdered woman will be discovered." And sure enough, there was a fire. But it happened in February 1939, when Captain W.H. Gregson accidentally knocked over an oil lamp in the hallway. The house was almost completely destroyed. But where were the bones? In August 1943, Price returned to the house to conduct a dig in the cellars. He discovered 2 bones that he said had been part of a young woman. Some people called Price a fraud, yet many others have said that there were simply too many people claiming to have seen ghosts or paranormal activity for it to be a hoax. Let's raise the terror level a little more, starting with the faceless nun. In 1840, St. Mother Theodore Guérin, along with 5 Sisters of Providence, traveled from their convent in France after being asked by the Bishop of Vincennes to build an academy for the young women of Indiana. The result was St. Mary of the Woods College in Terre Haute, which still stands today. Something you won't find in the college's glossy prospectus is the story of one particular nun, a young woman who it said was a formidable portrait artist. She would always start with the body and finish with the head, taking great pains to get the face right. Then one day she started a self-portrait. Let's just say it did not go well. What most people at the college won't know is that in the 1930s, many of the students were terrified to be alone in one of the buildings known as Foley Hall. Sister Esther Newport recalled decades later what happened, calling these years the Troubles. At the time, she was a young teacher in the art department. She explained that on a cold night in the winter, she went to the department to check on a student named Isabel. As Esther approached, she noticed Isabel was frozen in shock. "Isabel," she said, "what's the matter? You look disturbed." Isabel turned to her and replied, "I'm sick and tired of that nun coming around." "What nun?" asked Esther, feeling uneasy. "There shouldn't have been any nuns wandering around at night." "I don't know," said Isabel. "She leaves when I speak to her and I never see her face." A few weeks later, Esther walked into the big art room where Isabel was working, and again Isabel looked upset. She'd just seen the faceless nun. Esther was perplexed. Who is this faceless nun? Whoever she was scaring the students half to death. Then one morning, Esther walked into the art room where 2 students, Anna and Catherine, were cleaning up. Just like Isabel had, they'd asked who that strange nun was. "Which nun?" said Esther, almost knowing what was coming. "It was weird," the girl said. "She had pleats running down her gump, like nuns in the past." Catherine then looked at Esther and said, "You know, you're going to think I'm crazy, but this sister didn't have a face." This is a true story that comes from Sister Esther's own mouth. It should be said that she doesn't believe in faceless ghosts, but she knows those girls weren't lying about what they'd seen. The artistic nun we told you about earlier, who was good at portraits, never managed to finish her self-portrait. She died of unknown causes before she got to her face. It's believed that her faceless ghost has been haunting Foley Hall ever since. This next one will chill you to your bones. The haunting of Eckland Castle. In 1985, at Wapre Park in Wales, close to the ruins of Eckland Castle, a young man, Hugh Williams, is setting up his fishing gear at one of the ponds. It's still dark, about 3 a.m., when Hugh's dog starts growling, its eyes focused on a densely wooded area. Hugh later explained, "It was a clear moonlit night when I saw this ghostly figure floating across the pond, from left to right, going around the island across the rest of the water, through the bushes, and into one of the cottages that back onto the pond. What he saw might have been an apparition belonging to a brutal piece of Welsh history. But before we get to that, let's listen to Beverly, who in the 1990s had the fright of her life when she was walking out in Wapre Park, close to where Hugh had seen the ghost. Beverly was with her boyfriend. It was late evening. As they approached a waterfall, they heard a humming sound that got louder and louder. Beverly looked back, but there was nothing there. She looked into the woods. Nothing. They walked a little further when Beverly looked up at the waterfall. There she saw, in her own words, a womanly ghost figure walking across the top. A young man named Chris told the BBC that one day he was at that exact same waterfall with his friends when they all saw a nun standing at the top of the waterfall. He went home and told his mother, and she said, "Ah, you saw Nora the nun." According to the paranormal investigator Andrea German, the ghost everyone keeps seeing is fondly known as Nora and is likely the daughter of Llewellyn the Last, the man who built Eckland Castle. The daughter's real name was Gwenllian. Her mother died in childbirth and her dad was executed in 1282 by the English king Edward I. The king then locked Guanshan up in a priory for her whole life, and that's how she became a nun. It's believed she now haunts the grounds of the castle in an eternal search for the mother and father she never met. Now for some X-rated horror. An American possession. August 17, 1928, at the Franciscan Sisters Convent in Earling, Iowa, a woman was strapped to a bed hissing like a cat, the veins in her neck bulging, her teeth barred, her body convulsing. She's been possessed, and this is being recorded for history by several witnesses. Over the following weeks, she is subjected to a series of exhausting exorcisms. Her body levitates from the bed. She snarls and growls in multiple languages. Her lips swell, her face turns blue. Her body is inhabited by demons, by her own abusive father, by none other than Judas Iscariot. After weeks of trying to exorcise these evil spirits, the exorcist, Father Theophilus Reisinger, screams for what he hopes will be the last time. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I command you to depart this body and return to hell. The woman barks back, Beelzebub, Judas, Jacob, Mina, hell, hell, hell. The father takes a deep breath, and with all his energy he bellows, Depart, ye fiends of hell! Begone, Satan, the Lion of Judah reigns! Her body flexes and twists on the bed. The ropes around her blistered arms loosen. She opens her eyes and in a soft voice says the words, My Jesus, mercy! Praised be Jesus Christ! For a second, a tall figure with a matted black fur on his lower hooved body appeared in the room and vanished. You might have heard this story. It's the real tale of the possession of Anna Eckland, or Emma Schmidt, the daughter of German immigrants, who grew up in Marathon, Wisconsin. She was raised a Catholic, but around the age of 14, she couldn't go near a church. Her behavior changed, likely partly because she had an abusive alcoholic father. Still, her revulsion of all things religious and what was called her liking for unspeakable sexual acts resulted in her being the victim of demonic possession. Witnesses, including her own family, said this wasn't the same girl that they'd known as a child. Father Reisinger conducted an exorcism in 1912 when she was 30. But records show the successful series of exorcisms took place in 1928 with the help of Reverend Joseph Steiger. This was covered by the Des Moines Register newspaper, which wrote about a possessed woman being taken to Earling from an eastern city for the ritual. The moment the father saw her chained to an iron bed at the convent, she began to scream and hiss at him, her eyes protruding from their sockets, foam issuing from her mouth, her body sometimes bloated to the point of bursting. The nun said her abdominal region would at times turn as hard as iron and stone. She became so heavy that the iron rods of the bed bent beneath her, her body writhing in agony as she barked like a dog or mewed like a cat. The father asked Lucifer what he wanted with her, to which he replied, to bring her to despair. She must get the rope. She must go to hell. Witnesses said that she would screech in English, German, and Latin, all the time refusing to eat, yet throwing up rancid yellow bile, somehow mixed in with tobacco leaves. Oh, and she couldn't speak Latin. Numerous people would testify to this. The nuns that witnessed this woman's very real horrific ordeal were traumatized for the rest of their lives. The reports state that they all asked to be transferred. Evil still lurked at the convent. Today, locals talk about hearing screams in the night. You can be walking down the street and you're suddenly hit with the most putrid stink. Is that the smell of Satan, or maybe just a regular sewer? We'll let you decide. Now you need to watch The Origin of Evil, the Devil, or have a look at why it would suck to live through the end of the universe.